we are really excited to host our global chair for the Breakthrough Alliance, the president of the Merck Global Fund, Bill Taranto, who is going to be talking with our own HITLAB's own Ansley Bowen, our community development manager. Ansley, over to you.
Thank you so much, and I'm so glad to get the opportunity to talk to Bill Taranto today. He's the president of Merck Global Health Innovation Fund. I'm sure a lot of you know of him, but I'm going to let him take about 30 seconds and introduce himself.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for letting me participate today in an interview. My name is Bill Taranto, and I am president of the Merck Global Health Innovation Fund, which is one of Merck's corporate venture funds that's dedicated 100% to digital and technology. We're a $500 million evergreen fund, and mostly focused on growth investing. And we invest across what we call pharma services. So the best way to kind of think about it is if pharma needs a service, that's kind of where we're focused. So everything from R&D to supply chain and IT, patient-facing services, and real-world evidence and data. That's where we like to focus. So I look forward to talking to you today.
Yeah, well, thank you, Bill, and let's get right into it. What are the key criteria that you look for when evaluating potential investments in health tech startups? And are there any specific metrics or milestones that particularly influence your decision?
Well, as you might recall, we're growth investors, which means we're typically Series C or later. And we do A and B rounds occasionally, but we don't do pure startup or seed capital. But that notwithstanding, we do have criteria that we look for as a company moves, down the path from A funding to B funding, and hopefully to us to C funding. Obviously, we look at probably the main thing at that level, once you get to the Series C, is looking at the revenue. And is there a paying customer at this point? Do they have reimbursement? Who's paying for it? And what's the potential volume to grow this business beyond what it is? Because as we put in growth capital, we're trying to, blow out this company in a sense to get it to, from 50 million to 100 million or whatever the number is at that time. So one of the key, pieces we look is revenue. Where's the revenue coming from? And truly in the end, who's willing to pay for that particular service? We obviously look at the management and what their experience is. One of the funniest things that we always see when something gets to the growth round is they typically don't have a professional CFO. And a lot of times we're looking to probably bring in a new CFO. It's usually been somebody that's from the family or a bookkeeper or an accountant, but not somebody that's a full-time CFO. So that's one of the key things we look at from an employer perspective or employee perspective is, do they have a professional CFO? And the other kind of odd thing you find too when it gets to the Series C round is they may have created great technology, but sometimes they don't know how to sell it. So again, sometimes we're making sure that they have a good marketing and sales team or leader in order to sell the product. So that's kind of three fundamental areas that we're looking at, in order to bring this forward. But there's other metrics that we look at too. Again, when looking at the financials, not just the revenue, but what are the costs of the product? How close are they to being EBITDA positive? How close are they to cash flow positive? So a lot of things like that. And then the main thing that we're looking at as well is, are they solving an unmet need in healthcare? A lot of times we see a lot of companies that they're on the periphery of healthcare, or there's already a lot of solutions within the area that they're focusing on. For example, diabetes, we see a lot of diabetes apps, a lot of weight loss apps, a lot of things that help the diabetic patient. That's a crowded market. So we're also trying to look for assets that have differential value in the healthcare market. That's kind of the term we use. Are they solving a use case that will fundamentally change the way healthcare is thought about or delivered or impacts the patient? So that's another key thing that we look at. So it's a broad number of things, but I would say the first few that I mentioned are probably, once you get to the Series C sort of areas, what we mostly look at.
And when talking about those solutions that you're looking for in healthcare, what emerging trends do you see in the healthcare sector that you think are going to be the most promising for venture investments? And how do you see those trends really shaping the future of healthcare innovation?
Well, we're no different than any other industry. We're talking about AI, right? And what is the ultimate impact of AI across everything? One of the big areas that we're looking at in AI is in the drug discovery. We think that the use of AI can help us speed up how fast we can get a drug to market. And so we're looking at it in three different areas. One is what we call data and samples. So that's looking at large data sets that look at different models. And it can be in oncology, obviously, we're focusing on any kind of therapeutic area. And then we look at AI and ML in biology. So we're looking at companies that, think about how do they look at cell models, simulated cell models, and how do they maybe find, a drug faster than we could before. And that's kind of what we got to do in biology. And the last is, we're certainly still a vaccines company, and we're looking how does AI help us in vaccine delivery. But then if you think broader than just pharma services where we sit, we're seeing the use of AI in manufacturing and supply chain around how we do better track and trace. How do we track raw materials coming in, finished goods going out? And probably the biggest boon beyond what we see in sort of the pharma services, how's it going to affect the patient? How do doctors use AI to deliver better care? We're seeing monitoring devices using AI that are faster, better, that can almost monitor anything. We're seeing, different types of tools in which a physician can diagnose better. In diagnostic space, we're seeing all sorts of new AI tools where they can diagnose the patient faster and better. One of the areas we're highly interested in is where AI is, we think, on the forefront in lung screening for cancer. So we think that's a really important area. But again, it all uses AI. So I would say for us, probably the biggest area, and much like every other industry, we're focused on how is AI actually going to affect what we do? Then how does it sit on top of analytics and informatics sort of engines that help you then take all this data that's coming off all these different tools and devices and help you make decisions that lead to outcomes, because ultimately we're an outcomes company. But I would say that's probably, near term, the biggest area that we're really excited in. And I think all of healthcare is probably just as excited. And again, we're just like every other industry is what is the ultimate impact of AI? It's sort of the newest tool that gets everybody excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that so many people are talking about AI and what it can do in collaboration with our already existing solutions, and how we can really kind of come together with AI and hopefully have some really great solutions that come out in 2024 and of course in the years forward. And speaking on kind of collaboration and partnerships, how important are strategic partnerships and collaborations for the startups that you invest in? And can you share some examples of how partnerships have accelerated the growth and success of your portfolio companies?
Yes, it's probably one of the most important things we do. Sometimes we joke that the investing is the easy part. It's getting a commercial agreement, whether it's between Merck and the portfolio company or another pharma company. Because again, we do pharma services, so it's important that the pharma industry uses these assets. And where it really makes a difference is it does a couple different things. Number one, it helps the portfolio company learn how to work better with the pharma industry. So when they do that kind of partnership, they can build whatever their tool is, whatever their, program that they're offering to the pharma industry, how do they invest to make it better to better serve pharma? And then the pharma side is helping teach the portfolio company how do they use this technology, right? And then how do they think about it once they're using it and give that feedback back? So it's sort of a closed loop sort of feedback system of where the portfolio company is giving feedback back to the pharma, and pharma is giving feedback back. And then from that, when we invest our dollars, we can think about then how do we grow it better, faster, and bigger, and accelerate it? Because that's the biggest thing, is accelerating these assets. Because even Series C investments are startup companies in the end, right? And the hardest thing to do in digital is scaling. And it still all starts locally and regionally, and we got to think of ways, how do we get this across all 50 states, maybe even outside the US, and scale globally. So these partnerships are really important in growing the companies. And we probably, I think we're sitting on about 45 companies right now, and about 35 of our companies have commercial agreements with our portfolio companies. And we think it's the best way to accelerate the growth of these companies. And then what ends up happening too is that if we can accelerate that, then the value of our investment goes up, but also then the value to, say, Merck, who's learning how to use these technologies in a better way. As we were talking earlier, AI, we still have to learn how to use those technologies, right? We're not a technology company. We're a pharma company that creates ethical pharmaceuticals. So we need to learn how to use those kind of technologies. And so it's a symbiotic relationship. And so if that happens, then Merck's business is better, and even pharma, if the other farmers are using those services, then our business as a venture capitalist is better because we're growing a company. And so it's probably one of the most important things. The investment alone doesn't help the company. They've got to have partnerships, and especially in my industry, across all pharma, not just Merck. It's probably even more important. In fact, I would even say probably if pharma's already working with them before we even invest, they've learned a lot already about how they're working with it, and then they've thought about how our investment dollars will grow their business. So it's probably the most important thing, I think, of sort of post-investment or pre-investment is that partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was great to get your insights on that. But I'm also curious, what are some of the common challenges that health tech startups face and how can they overcome them? And do you have any advice also to give early stage startups when they're seeking funding and support from a venture fund like yours?
So at least I can talk on healthcare for a minute because obviously that's my specialty. So rather than healthcare, we're probably one of the most complicated industries that are out there. You know, we joke that when you get a prescription, there's 20 different either individuals or companies within the system that have to touch your prescription before you even get it. You may not even know if you get it at that point. And so one of the key things that we try to tell healthcare startups is understand the industry and all the touch points that occur within the industry because it's very complicated. Everything from the payer side to the physician side, to the pharma side even, where do all the pieces come together? And you have to understand the regulatory pathway that exists. And it's not just about always getting approval for something, but even how do you get to reimbursement and then who pays for it? Why do they pay for it? That's just part of the regulatory pathway. So one of the biggest challenges and one of the things I encourage startups to do is really get to understand not only the space that you're focused on in healthcare, but healthcare more broadly. I think another interesting thing that startups struggle with is how to appropriately spend the money that they have raised. Sometimes they underfund themselves, or sometimes they overfund themselves and think they have to burn through that money. And that's get back to when we were talking about earlier about having a CFO in a sense, where you really have to learn to manage the money. And then one of the third thing I think is again, don't go into a crowded space in healthcare. Try to pick a space where you're solving, like I said, we call it a use case, but solving a problem that has that disproportionate value, because that's what's going to help you grow the fastest. But within that, where's the biggest need? And it's okay to interview, like ask pharma, what are they trying to do, right? And they'll tell you, and that's what you should try and solve. Or, what are the physicians struggling with? Interview the physicians that are out there within the area you're interested in. What are they struggling with? And they'll tell you. And it's a great learning experience of how you think about, growing. I think, just really being smart about the area in which you want to grow your business. So that's even thinking outside healthcare. I just broadly say to anybody, learn the industry that you're investing in or building your company in. And if you can do that, you really can just build a better company, but it's easier said than done. I think one of the, other things about startups is it's really hard to build a company, and you got to take a bit of a long game. And if you look at some of the most successful companies that are out there, if you really look at their timeline, they've done pivots, and they've changed their model. It takes time to build a company, and certainly within healthcare, it takes a long time. And so we tell everybody to be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. And build your company slowly. You don't got to, go from that A round to the C round overnight. It's take your time and build through each stage. Because even after we invest, there's another growth round. It's not just our growth. You keep building the company as you go along, but take the long game. Be patient when you're thinking about building your company, because it hardly ever happens overnight. Yeah, there's always the exception to the rule, but really doesn't happen overnight. And then, the last thing is think about your personnel, the employees that you have. A lot of times you start your company with your friends and everything, but, even yourself, you may not be the right person to bring it to certain stages. You might have been the right person to bring it to 25 million sales, but you're not the right person to bring it to 100. And you have to be honest with yourself. And so it's thinking about, as you're building the company, is bringing in the right type of employees, because literally that's what makes a difference as well. It's not just the capital, it's the people you've hired, because they're ultimately the ones delivering whatever it is you've been asked to deliver to us, the end user, and the investment market. So I think those are some key things that we think about. That also go back to what we look at, the first question you asked me, what do we look at when we invest? All those things need to be there as well. And it's things that those investors, the startup companies, no matter what stage you are, it affects you at any stage, you need to be thinking about those things.
Absolutely. And Bill, thank you so much for coming on today. You're definitely the person to talk to when we're talking about startups and venture. And it's so great to kind of flip the script and actually interview you, because typically you do a lot of moderating and interview others on our program. So it was so great to kind of sit down and talk with you about this. Of course, Bill's information and LinkedIn will be provided in the chat. So if you'd like to connect with him, please do. But again, Bill, thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy, so really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And it's great to be on the other side and be interviewed. So appreciate it very much. Thank you.